how important is this? I mean, especially at a time when there are fewer and fewer public assets for investors to buy.
Well, first off, welcome to the CEO deal-making club to Ted Pick. It is a deal where no real price has been announced. They haven't disclosed the terms of the deal, so fair to say it's probably a sub-$500 million deal. So it is a bit of a nibble for Morgan Stanley. This is not the main course. This is not the real deals that they want to pounce on. But it is strategically very important. When you look back at James Gorman's tenure at Morgan Stanley, that was bookended by two massive deal sprees. The first one, right before he became CEO, Smith Barney really launched the big Morgan Stanley wealth management juggernaut, and towards the end, the E-Trade and Eaton Vance deal. But the deal that often does not get talked about, but is extremely important inside Morgan Stanley, was the Solium deal. It was a stock plan administrator for for companies, where Morgan Stanley would go and make it their workplace channel to find employees who were getting these equity stock-based comp, bring them into their ecosystem. Similarly, you can look at the strategic importance of the deal. Do not look for the value and the size of the deal, but what it could do for Morgan Stanley in terms of entrenching itself in the private markets ecosystem, as you rightly pointed out, at a time when more and more companies are choosing to stay private for much longer. A lot of the deal making and a lot of the transactions are happening in their early stage before they hit the public markets, and that's where the banks have to find ways to make money, facilitate some of these transactions, at the same time also find people who can come into the Morgan Stanley system. A lot of the employees who want to trade on a marketplace like EquityZen will suddenly come into a lot of money. They need to invest that money. And that's where Morgan Stanley will show up with other arms of its business and say, you will stay within the Morgan Stanley sandpit. That's the goal here.
I would say, how much of this is just indicative of where wealth management, I guess for Morgan Stanley, but at all the banks is going, that they realize that they need offerings that look like something like private capital, whether it's bringing in this deal specifically with EquityZen or just having their own private capital offering?
Because you also have to see the read-through. Once you build these relationships with private companies at the early stage, you're also talking about follow-through activity in the investment banking pipeline. So it's the wealth management business that can also bring you a lot more investment banking business. And the wealth management business is a place where you're keen to grow assets. Investors are awarding consistent fee-based revenue making, and that comes from the wealth management business. So yes, it is extremely important. You can see that Jet Finn, this head of the wealth management business at Morgan Stanley, is the one talking about this deal. And also down the road, several years later perhaps, but down the road, a possible CEO contender at Morgan Stanley because he's running a very important division.